I'm back, and we are bound to follow the Norway Gnomes playing the Pro Chess League. It's the first Pro Chess League match of the season. The Norway Gnomes are playing the Volga Stormbringers. And actually, if you were paying attention to the to the last season, you will know that this is a replica of the final knockout match of the Eastern Division last year. So these are the two Eastern Division teams that were vying for the place in the super final last year. So in my opinion, it's an absolutely top match in the very first round. And we see that Volga is playing a very evenly matched team. They have a lot of these very scary, very good Russian 2400 players, and they are going to be a big challenge for our gnomes. But we have a bit of a joker. We have the world chess champion Magnus Carlsen playing on board number 1. We have the world junior champion Aryan Tari on board number 2. It's going to be a very interesting match. I think it's going to be really close. Thank you to Pioneer and Ruben who has subscribed. Go Norway Gnomes, says Hawks in the chat. That is my feeling as well, my sentiment. But the thing is, it's going to be tricky. There are some technical difficulties. The match is starting in 13 minutes, and my team isn't ready yet. So I may have to multitask a little bit before we start the match. So I'm hoping that Magnus and Aryan are going to be managed basically without a hitch, because they are playing basketball in the Netherlands. The Netherlands was hit by a bit of a storm today, and as such, the Tata Steel participants had to go somewhere. I don't know where, but they needed to find an indoor basketball court. And apparently they will not make it back in time for the first game. So they will be playing on their mobile devices. So that's going to be interesting. It's 11 more minutes until start. And they are not online on the server. Hov 2001 is asking, will you be playing the Pro Chess League this year? And maybe is the correct answer, but it's mostly for emergencies. So our team is so strong. I am not needed to play, but I will if we have some shortage of people. The thing about having a team in the Pro Chess League is that very often your guys are busy at tournaments. And this is one such occasion with Magnus and Aryan having a rest day in Vaikansé. They wanted to play. They thought it was going to be very fun to play, which I appreciate. It's not often you get two world champions who will take a day off and their rest day in a chess tournament and play. But right now I'm extremely nervous because neither guy is on the line, and there's a risk of forfeit in the first game. So now I'm going to be chatting and using some exclamation marks and capitalized letters and conveying the seriousness of the next 10 minutes. So that's going to be interesting. Tari is saying in the chat that Magnus and Aryan should be sitting a couple of floors down above me right now. Livatera asks, has this started or not? And the answer to that is, our match is starting in 10 minutes. So the Norway Gnomes will be playing in 10 minutes, but the Pro Chess League has officially started. So the other 6 teams in our division have started their games. So we are the last match to start. And let's see. I still think they are going to be fine, but when there's 10 minutes left, you're just very worried. I have gotten some comments about my sound in the stream I did earlier today. I've been checking my systems and everything is at max. I even moved my microphone closer. So I'm at this point, I cannot do anything more. And I'm hoping you have some way of turning up the sound if you can't hear me. Let's check in with the chat. Microphone boost is at 100%. So I don't think that can be the problem. El Ignorante asks, are you going to play? No, I am not. We have Magnus Carlsen, Aryan Tari, Johan Salomon, and Elham Abdrlauf. And those are our 4 chosen players for this very important match. And Pawn Guard has a very good question. Who is Elham Abdrlauf? And this is something I'm pretty excited about. It is a 13-year-old kid from Oslo. He's really very talented. He's pretty low rated, which is important when we have a team of world champions. We're only allowed to have an average of 2,500, and we need somebody to lower the average. So Elham is our joker, so to speak. He's a very dangerous blitz player, and I'm really excited to see how he is going to do playing against these very tricky Russian players. Staley asks, so 2,500 is the max average for the each lineup or for the entire team? And this limit counts for each lineup. So you can have lots of very, very strong players on the team, and the Norway Gnomes has some magnificent players. We have Simen Agdestein, we have Laurent Fressinet, we have we have me, Hammer. So we have a very strong team, but we can only field a team with an average rating of 2,500 for each round. And now it's 5 more minutes until start. I'm gonna do another check to see whether my guys are on the line. No. And no. Yes. Okay, so our 2 basketball playing world champions are not on the line yet. It's 4 more minutes. I'm starting to get pretty nervous, but they have seen the messages I sent. Let's see any more questions in the chat. Is Carlsen playing? And that is affirmative. Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, is taking time off from his Tata Steel rest day to play for the Norway Gnomes. And that is something we massively appreciate. But right now, it's a bit of a question of whether he will be in time for the first round. So they have been out and about in the Netherlands playing basketball, and they haven't made it back home to the hotel for the first round. So there's some question of whether it's gonna work out for the first round. Okay, Magnus is on the line. Tari is on the line. Whoa! We have a full team. Fantastic. That is excellent news. 2 minutes before the deadline, I am the team captain. I was massively nervous, I will admit that. But the guys have an internet connection. They are going to be playing for the Norway Gnomes. It's going to be an exciting first round. I'm going to make sure that we are ready to watch all the games. Okay, that was I was more nervous than you kind of were than you thought. Okay, the chat actually has gone pretty. Can you make the sound higher? I can scream. I can try to scream, but I cannot make the sound higher. I'm sorry. Good luck to my teammates on Norway Gnomes, says Johan Sebastian. He's one of our other players. We will see him later in the season. Time control is 15 minutes for the entire game and 2 seconds increment per game. MVL is playing. MVL is playing. Sound is good. I've started to scream. Apparently that's what I needed to do. I'll keep doing that. Try to fix technical issues as they come. And the games have started. The games have started. Let's do the remove the pairings. Let's get this out of the way. We have Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces against Ilja Dudukin. And Magnus has played a very uncommon second move, his pawn to a6. Let's see if we find the other Norwegian players. We have Aryan Tari with the black pieces against Mikhail Gorozhanin. And it is a quiet opening, not many moves. It's a London system from the Russian player. Let's see if we find Johan. Johan Salomon is our third player. He is playing the white pieces against Azat Sharafiev. My pronunciation is probably horrible. My apologies to any Russian viewers. And then our last guy is Elham Abdrlauf with the white pieces against Sergey Grigoriants. That's basically a big success already at the beginning. We have all the players ready with an internet connection. Elham playing his bishop out, giving a check. I think if Elham makes a point here against the highest rated Russian player, I would consider that a big success. So we'll see if Elham can make a draw. Maybe he can win. He's a very tricky blitz player. Show Magnus, says Potato. So by popular demand, we are going to focus mainly on the world chess champion Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces. The system in Pro Chess League is that the highest rated player plays against the lowest rated players on the opposing team in the first game. So Dudukin, even though he has a rating of almost 2400, he is the lowest rated player on the Russian team. And we played them last year. We managed to win the important knockout game, but we lost the group stage game against these Russians. We have some bad memories. They are very tricky players, very good players, as I think Russians are prone to be very good chess players. So that's not unexpected. I'm going to pour myself some tea because this is going to be a very long day. Magnus is playing so fast. So we have 13 moves on the board. He still has 14 minutes, 30 seconds left. And 10 of those seconds he spent on his first move. So I would say a very good start for Magnus. He has given himself the Isolani pawn in the center. This pawn cannot be protected by other pawns, and as such it needs to be protected by pieces, and that's why it's a weakness, because pieces protecting pawns usually end up having a defensive function. So Magnus has 3 pieces protecting this pawn. That should be sufficient, so I'm not too concerned. b3 threatening bishop a3, preventing castling. So Magnus is going to castle immediately, making sure that his king is safe. White has a very good grip on the square ahead of the Isolani pawn. But on the other hand, Magnus has the option to go with his rooks to the open files and maybe do something there. Probably, yeah, objectively I would say white is a little bit better, but Magnus has gotten a good start with time. He's going to be making his opponent nervous. I mean, his opponent is playing the world champion, and the world champion is just blitzing out moves. That's always going to be a very tricky feeling. Thank you to Elham, my newest subscriber. El Ignorante has thought that Nordic countries are a bit xenophobic. And that's probably not... I hope that's not true. But you never know. I think in every society there are people with different views, and some of them we're not going to be... Some of them we're going to disagree with. And xenophobes, probably one of those groups. Magnus is opposing the rooks on the c-file. I'm going to switch games. I'm not going to stay on Magnus's game for the entire broadcast. This looks to be a little bit better for white, but Magnus is up on time and he has good development. So I think he can manage to win it, but objectively right now, I think he's worse. We'll switch to Aryan's game, and I really like his position. This knight on c3 is very limited in its options to go forward by the black pawns. So these pawns on e6, d5 and a6 are restricting the knight on c3. And with this extra pawn on c5 putting pressure on the white center, I would say that Aryan is... Yeah, maybe knight e5 now is a good move. But if not knight e5, I would say black is already better. And even if knight e5, then maybe Aryan can go queen c7. Yeah. Knight e5, possible move. But then queen c5, c7. So it's all about the e5 square at the moment in this game. Let's move on. So in this game, both players have been spending a bit of time, and Aryan is up 2 minutes on the clock. So I would say I'm already optimistic about Aryan as well. I think he has been very good at this Pro League format, and I really like his start. We have Johan Salomon with the white pieces against Sharafiev, and Johan already with probably an advantage because black's pawns on the queen side have been split. So these queenside pawns can be attacked, and yeah, I like this move. Rook c1, putting the rook on the c file, indirect pressure against the c6 pawn. Question from Pawn Guard: how did it go last year? And last year was a resounding success for the Gnomes. We finished in second place. We made it all the way to the finals. Lost in the finals against St. Louis Archbishops, but we beat Stockholm in the semifinals, and we got the $10,000 second prize. So in my opinion, that was a huge success. Thank you to B Muffle, who has just subscribed. Wixel asks, is it a possibility that players could cheat in tournaments like this using computers? And that is definitely a possibility, and that happened many times the last season. But the thing is that most people who did that got caught, because chess.com has anti-cheating measures in place, and also they have the ability to analyze games after the fact to determine whether or not a player has cheated. So yes, people cheat, but most of the people who cheat get caught, and as such the integrity of the competition is upheld. B-Muffle wants to be able to see my loss against Kurtz yesterday, so he subscribed just to get that. I don't know what to say. He was better than me that game, so a well-deserved victory there, and I may have been frustrated during the course of the game. An important moment now, rook d2, putting pressure along the second rank. It's going to be important how to get that rook out. And I like Johan's move, rook d1, immediately challenging the rook. I think rook d8 is likely. Rook b2. So now white has control over the open d file. He can even go rook b1 if he wants. He can try to force the rook back to d2 and then go with the king to e1 and put pressure on this rook. I don't know if it's a good idea, but it's a possibility. I really think that white is quite a bit better in this position. Johan is down on the clock, but he's better on the board. We'll go to our youngest team member, Elham, and he has an equal position against the very strong Sergey Grigoriants. Sergey is one of the top players in the Title Tuesday tournament, so he's gonna be a real challenge. And I really like the bishop here, controlling the b8 square. So if Elham now goes back, then he can try to get his rook up to b5. Then he would even be better. Wow, I think there's a chance that Elham is better in this position. That would be fantastic if he was able to get a point here. But on the other hand, he has been spending a lot of time. He already spent half his time. He's soon below 7 minutes on the clock. We'll go back to Magnus Carlsen. And Magnus has a knight and queen against bishop and queen. So he's planning to go knight g5 and create an attack against the king. And this queen b2 move was a big mistake, I think. I think this is a big mistake. I think Magnus can sacrifice the pawn on g7, and he's done it. He's played knight g5, threatening queen h3. Ooh. I think that was a huge blunder. I think Magnus now, with the queen and knight cooperating brilliantly, I think he's going to win this game. Maybe queen e2. Yeah, maybe white needs to go queen e2 to stop this. And he's done it. And then Magnus should check and then play h5. h5 for Magnus. h5 and maybe queen g4. I think. So I think Magnus is a bit better. He's not winning, but he's better in this. Johan Sebastian is playing for the Gnomes this year, but he's not playing this game. So we can change the teams. We can vary the teams a little bit. So Johan Sebastian will be playing for the Gnomes, but he's not playing this round. Hammer is a pretty good player, but he will be doing mostly commentary during the matches instead of playing himself. So h5, I got that move correctly. It's always fun when you are on the same wavelength as the world champion. I think white would really like to play f3. But then there's a question of h4. Maybe h4 is a good move. h4 could be a good move. So f3 trying to take control over light squares, and then h4 is annoying. Silver Surfer Gorilla asks, wow, really? Are you not going to play? And I might play. I'm not saying I'm not going to play, but I'm saying that I'm only going to play if there's an emergency in terms of nobody else is available. Thy Fat Bat asks, do you think Carlsen will be annoyed if he doesn't win this game? Yeah, I think he will be annoyed, but I also think that he will win this game. I think he has some initiative that's difficult to cope with for white. And in addition, Dudukin is down to 4 minutes on the clock, and that's really going to hurt him. Regardless of whether or not Magnus's attack will succeed, he will have a very tricky defensive task with only 4 minutes left. Okay, we'll jump to Aryan Tari with the black pieces. I really liked his position more previously, because now he has this pawns on the light squares, which is blocking his bishop. Probably it was bishop d7, knight c5. I don't like this bishop d7 move either, because now the knight is hitting the pawn on b7, and it's a bit tricky defending that pawn. I would probably play f4 at some moment, but then you're still going to have some weaknesses along the e file. So I think basically what Aryan is saying, that he's hoping his opponent will play f4, and then he will go with his knight up to e4. But this bishop d7 move was not that good because he's having trouble finding out how to defend the pawn on b7. So I'm not sure what happened here, but the pawn structure definitely got went in black's favor since we last checked out this game. Mao Zedong asks, did you just refer yourself to yourself in the third person? I think I did. But with a name like Hammer, people would be disappointed if you didn't do it. That's my excuse. Okay, so we have Johan, who has actually played the exact plan I mentioned, trying to exchange the rook and then coming with his king. So after c5, he will play king e1, and he will force the rook out. Because if black goes rook d8, then rook d1, and you get at least one rook exchanged. So this is a very favorable position for white. Rook d8 and now rook d1. Rook d1 and rook c2 is no longer available because of exchanging. Okay, rook d4. Rook d4. Probably you will play f3 at some point, and you'll play knight a4 at some point. So I'm guessing Johan will go knight a4, threatening the pawn, trying to provoke it to go further up the board. Yeah, so I think knight a4 is a good move here. And we have Elham. And this is actually very surprising. Elham is massively down on time. And he's usually a very quick player. So that comes as a surprise to me. He's still equal material against the Russian Grandmaster. But on the other hand, now Grigoriants has gotten this very nice d5 square for his knight. And in connection with being very low on time, I think it's not looking too good for Elham. He's actually spending too much time, which is strange because my concern before the round was that Elham would be playing too quickly, and as it turns out, he's playing too slowly. Tari is saying that Elham is having connection problems. That makes a lot of sense, because normally he wouldn't be playing this slowly. Okay, so he's having to... Yeah, I don't know how to solve that. That's going to be tricky to solve. Yeah, and that's also going to create a problem for future rounds. If he has connection problems, then we might not be able to play him as often. Okay. Ignorante says, Elham must be nervous. He's a kid. Yeah, he's a kid, but he's pretty good. And he actually made a draw against me in Rapid. So he's very, very good. And he's not really the kind of guy that gets nervous. Or at least he makes sure that nobody can tell. How old is he? Asks Banjo Snorkel. And he is 13 years old. Tricks for the win asks, is that Elham's real rating? It seems a bit low. And that is not his current rating. The Pro Chess League uses September ratings. And Elham was rated 1900 in September. But since then, he has gained 100, maybe 150 points in FIDE rating, and also he's much higher rated in the FIDE Blitz and Bullet rating than he is in normal rating. Shumian asks, is it mandatory to have a low rated player on the team? No, it's not. but you need to have an average rating below 2500. So when you have like very strong players such as Magnus, such as Aryan, then having a low rated player is necessary to be able to fulfill the rating requirement. And we see that Magnus has gotten a winning endgame, still 10 minutes on the clock, and he has pressured the Russian player, and now he's winning a pawn on e3. He's a pawn up. The knight is much more mobile than the bishop, so the knight can go back and forth and tricky, and wow, d2, that's a good finish. The pawn is going to be a queen, and Magnus Carlsen has put the Norway Gnomes in the lead. In the lead. In the lead. Aryan's position I still don't like. Something went wrong after the opening. I liked his opening, but now I'm not sure what's going on. Johan has a very good position. He has a rook endgame, and his opponent has terrible pawns. So we can see that black has 4 pawn islands. That means pawns that effectively can defend each other. And this means that there are plenty of attacking weaknesses to go for in black's position. So I really like Johan's position. I've liked it for a long time. And Johan's opponent is down to 2 minutes on the clock. So maybe he can give us a 2-0 lead. Let's see. Elham. There was some talk about Elham making a mouse slip. But now he's losing everything. He's a rook down. He only has 5 seconds left. That's going to be an unfortunate start for him. But I really think that he was in this game for a very long time. And I think during the course of the next 3 games, the other guys are going to notice that Elham is very tricky. So the highest rated Russian player, Grigoriants, managed to beat our little kid, but he will be back. Kelvis asks, in the Twitch channel, it seems like the team from Norway is called Oslo Trolls. That is because there are 2 teams from Norway. Norway is such a strong chess nation at the moment, and we managed to qualify 2 teams for the Pro Chess League. So it's the Oslo Trolls and the Norway Gnomes. And I should really go to a game that's still going on. So we have Aryan with the black pieces. I think he's a bit worse against Gorozhanin. Gorozhanin. I think Aryan is worse, but he can probably defend this. And as was pointed out in the chat, Aryan is up on time. Aryan is up on time, so that could be very crucial as the clock ticks down, that he has those extra seconds to consider his moves. F4, now I'm thinking knight f6, and then maybe knight e4, maybe knight g4. That's going to be a tricky move to defend against. Okay, so he didn't go for that. Probably he was concerned about knight c5, which would threaten both the rook on b7 and the pawn on a6. Yeah, so I think this is a pretty... Now you have knight f6. Okay, no, because then knight... Yeah, so I think Aryan is preparing knight f6, and then he will have pressure against the c3 pawn. And this is actually very clever, because he put both his rooks in the c file, and now he's ready to go... No. Maybe he should go bishop b7. I think bishop b7 and then going with the knight. Yeah, and now he's going to play knight f6, and there's no way of stopping knight e4. So I would say during the last couple of moves, Aryan has made some improvements to his position. Oslo Trolls didn't qualify but received a wild card because they won an online popularity poll, says Stiley. And that is true, but on the other hand, they wouldn't be qualified for this poll unless they were just right behind the qualifiers. So the like 3 best teams that didn't qualify had a popularity poll, and Oslo Trolls managed to win that. Red Ribbon asks, is the whole team playing together? And the answer to that is no. So Johan is playing at his house, Elham is playing at his house, and then we have Aryan and Magnus, our 2 world champions. They are playing in Vaikansee on their rest day from the Vaikansee tournament. Okay, so we have Johan with the white pieces. His opponent is really low on time. Really low on time. Probably he's intending rook a5. No, f4. F4. That's a very good move from Johan. Very good move from Johan. And Johan is going to check on d5. Then he's going to take the e5 pawn. A very good positional game from Johan Salomon. His opponent is down to 3 seconds and resigns. So the Norway Gnomes is up to a 2-1 lead. 2-1 lead. So if Aryan manages to make a draw in this game, we will be leading the match. And if he manages to win, we will have a commanding lead. And Aryan is really using the fact that his opponent doesn't have that much time. And now he somehow managed to get the white knight into a very defensive position, guarding the pawn on b3. So now, kind of with the rooks on the c file and the b file, it's black that is making the threats. And just as I said that, he played c4, and now he has a threat of c5, forking the rook and king. So probably Aryan now needs to go rook b4. Rook b4. And now he has some threats towards this pawn and the pawn on a4. The pawn on a4 has nowhere to go. So Aryan is going to win the pawn on a4. And now the question is, can he sacrifice the exchange on c4? And I think the question is no, because there's a knight e4 check at the end of that line. Takes on g5. That feels like a big mistake. Now he can attack on the h file. Can Aryan get a rook to the h file? There's a threat against the pawn on f5. c5 check, and now takes on f5. But on the other hand, playing c5 check means that now the black rook is attacking the d4 pawn. This was actually very good for Aryan. This c5 check was a big mistake, because now he can capture the d4 pawn, and also he will capture the c5 pawn. I think just rook c4 now. Rook c4, very good. And then rook takes c5, threatening the bishop, having some pressure against, okay, that rook. The bishop has to go. And bishop b5? No. Maybe g4 and then bishop b5. Bishop b5 feels like such a killer move. a3. He has a passed pawn and he's not afraid to use it. And there's tactics. Tactics I don't understand. Tactics. What's going on? Takes. There's a lot of trades, but Aryan keeps his passed pawn. He can go a2, yeah. And then rook b4, and then he has bishop check. No, but bishop e6 check. That's a very good move. Very good move. Aryan, I think, missed that move. And now rook a1 to attack. Yes, and then bishop c4 anyway. You go bishop c4 anyway and finish off with rook b1. Okay, the sacrifice of the exchange, but you can just go pick up this pawn and then take the other pawn. Just take the h pawn, that's going to be sufficient. Yes. Very good. The chess.com username for our Elham is Mr. Elham Risa. Thank you to Torfins for your subscription. Okay, that was a big round for the Norway Gnomes. We won 3 games, and the only game we lost was our Joker, the kid, Mr. Elham, who lost against an incredibly strong Russian grandmaster. So I think we cannot judge Elham's level until we see him against the 3 other Russian players. Axe Villager says, yay! How many matches are to be played? And in the Pro Chess League, the setup is that you play each member of the opposite team. So there will be a total of 16 games and 4 games per player. So every player on one team will be playing against every player on the other team. Stiley is complimenting Tari on his play, saying that it's very good strategy to stay a couple of minutes ahead of your opponent on the clock. I'm going to take a little bit of a timeout myself, because I feel like at this speed I'm going to lose my voice. I'll try to figure out when the next game starts, but usually there's a bit of a break. I think we're not going to start for another 10 minutes. I think every game starts each 45. So I think there's 45 minutes. I'm gonna have to do some team management and figure out when the next round is going to start, because otherwise my guys might not be there when they start the games. Okay, so that was a very successful first round. Gressley is doing trivia on the chat, saying that the Scheveningen system, played by Elham's opponent, is a name so hard to pronounce, it was used as a test by the Dutch to reveal German spies. And the Scheveningen system is the name of the system in which you play a team tournament where everybody plays each other. It's also the name of an opening, and I think it may have been the opening that was played against Elham. So it's a name that comes to use in this match. And on the team chat, we have people complimenting Elham on his fighting skill. So that's very good, having teammates backing up each other. I think the next game will start in 8 minutes. I haven't gotten confirmation of that from the pro chess administrators, but I think there's a round every 45 minutes. So the last round started at 5:30, and I think the next one is 6:15, but I'm not so sure. Red Ribbon is asking the really correct and critical questions. Do you think playing today is a disruption for Magnus? And I'm not sure. But the fact that he's willing to play, and that he said in interviews that he was looking forward to the match, he's a pretty honest guy. So I think, judging by those comments, he thinks it's fun. And I think you don't get to be world chess champion without enjoying chess. And he enjoys winning. So my hope is that if he manages to win all his 4 games in this match, he will have more confidence and really come out swinging in the next Tata Steel tournament game. Paldrick asks, who does Magnus play tomorrow? And I believe he's playing the black pieces against Peter Svidler. So that's going to be a tricky game. And also Aryan is black against Korobov. And Korobov has made 4.5 out of 5 in the first couple of games. So both, especially Aryan, but also Magnus is having pretty difficult black games coming up. I'm not sure that sound was good. Okay, so we're up 3-1. I believe that games will start in another 6 minutes. Maybe we should be looking at some of the games. We only got glimpses of each game. So I think looking at how Magnus managed to go into an endgame and win this game is going to be pretty interesting. So I managed to guess this h5 move, and after bishop c5, Magnus just played queen g4. That's a very good move going into the endgame. Good instincts from Magnus. Takes. And now there's a problem for white, because if he goes with his king into the center, then he might drop off one of these pawns on f2 or h2. So basically, I think he won this game thanks to the knight being able to attack every square on the board, whereas the white bishop can only attack the dark squares. So bishop b4, king comes into play, and if white doesn't really do anything, it's like 3, 4, 5, 6 moves, and then the entire black position collapses. So after h4, there's en passant, king h2, and then f4. So he gave up this pawn in order to be able to get it back. But when he got it back, then Magnus was just in time to get his king into the center. And after king e4, Magnus has a dominating king's position and was able to win with the d4 break. And if you exchange, then knight takes and you get the attack against the pawn. b4, then knight c6, and the bishop and pawn. It's not going well for white. So so that was the brilliant idea. And instead, Dudukin played bishop b6, But as we saw on stream, after d3 and knight h2, there was no way of saving the pawn on e3. So that was, I think actually that was very, very instructive from Magnus. The way he just seemingly had an attack and just immediately went into the endgame and realized that this endgame would be very, very good for him. They have started again. Okay, but I wrote a command to follow Magnus. Okay, they started. So apparently they start every 40 minutes. I'll make sure to keep that in mind for the next break. This time we have number 1 against number 3. So first number 1 plays against number 4, then 3, then 2, and in the final game of the match we have the 2 number 1 seeds against each other. Magnus is playing a sideline against the French. Let's look at Johan Salomon. Johan has played the white pieces, made a very nice win against I don't remember which guy, but now he has a much tougher game. Black against Sergey Grigoriants. I think a draw here with black would be very, very good for our chances. We have Aryan Tari with the white pieces against Ilja Dudukin. So Dudukin is the guy who got beaten up by Magnus in the last round. Maybe Aryan can make a repeat performance here. Bishop b5. Yeah, I like it. To me, it seems like this is just a tempo up on some other line. So I think the opening has been a success already for Aryan. Let's go to Elham, our last guy. He's playing the black pieces against Sharafiev. And now I didn't get to see it from Elham's point of view. I'll do what's it called when you flip the board? When you, yeah, I don't remember the command. Axe Villager in the chat is starstruck at the fact that Johan Sebastian Christiansen, one of our other gnomes, is informing me that the games have started. We'll keep Magnus's game as the opening develops. It's a closed King's Indian attack. And once again, I'm very happy with the opening choice of Magnus. He has played pretty quickly, and at this point, he has a solid space advantage with this pawn restricting the black pieces. So I'm happy about his opening. He's gonna put a rook on the d file. He's gonna play h4. He's gonna play h5, maybe even h6. So this is gonna be an attacking game, I think, from the world champion. Hard Rain Chess says this is the best rest day ever so far, and he's already soon off to the chess club to play some blitz chess for himself. So he gets to watch the world champion playing for the Gnomes and play some blitz himself. Hosa asks, how do I find the games at chess.com so that I can follow the games you don't show? And it's gonna be too complicated for me to explain that off the bat, but you need to go into the chess.com live server. So chess.com live server. Use your chess.com username. It's free. And then you look at the binoculars on the right hand side, and you can find all the games being played. And finding the Norwegian games is going to be actually tricky because there are so many Pro Chess League games going on. We have the entire Eastern Division playing at the same time. I should really allow some links, but I don't know how to do that right now. Magnus is once again putting pressure on his opponent by playing very quickly. Let's look at some of the other games. We have Elham, our kid, and he has a pretty decent opening, it would appear. Now his opponent has a good bishop putting pressure towards the b7 square, but on the other hand, the center is, well, it has basically evaporated, and maybe Elham can put some pressure against the e5 pawn. And it seems like maybe Elham's connection issues are not so bad this time, because he has more time than his opponent. So right now he's threatening the bishop on d4. Probably that bishop will go... Yeah, it's not really certain where that bishop will go. Maybe back to c3, and then something like knight d5 and bishop e6. I think it's worse for black, but it could be... It's not that bad. It's not that bad. So Elham has a pretty good position, and his opponent, which is also crucial, his opponent is thinking. So Elham has gotten a time advantage. Okay, so Gressely in the chat says that if you go to chess.com/TV, on the bottom of the video, there are buttons you can click to follow all the games. So below the video, there are buttons to follow all the games. And we are looking now at Johan Salomon with the black pieces. He has a very good knight on d4. I think Johan might even be better here with the black pieces. Just play bishop f6, give that knight some protection, play a5 at some point to prevent b4 and trying to undermine the c5 pawn. He might even, if he's happy with the draw, and probably he is, white is not really threatening to take on d4, because that would be opposite colored bishops and a very likely draw, as black can create some kind of blockade on the black squares. So maybe he's also considering stuff like queen b6, and as I was drawing queen b6, he played that move. That's interesting. And then go with the rooks trying to attack d5. I don't know. I think he's okay with black, which is good. And he's also, wow, Johan is 4 minutes up on the clock against Grigorians. That is pretty special, because Grigorians is usually such a tricky player. Magnus has gone with his h-pawn. He played h5, h4, h5, and now they traded pawns on g6, and that has ruined the black pawn structure. Magnus now sacrificing a piece, putting pressure on the e6 pawn. So this e6 pawn can just take on d5, but then there's e6. So take on d5, e6 It's a discovered attack against the black queen on b8. Ooh, if I was Gorozhanin, I would be very, very nervous. This looks like a massive attack incoming. But on the other hand, he cannot really stop it. I mean, the only way you can defend this pawn is by putting the knight on f8. But then you're basically saying to the world champion, come and get me. And I'm pretty sure Magnus would. So I think the best kind of practical chance would be to take this knight. But on the other hand, if e6 is just winning, yeah, black is in trouble. This last move from Magnus was very good. And wow, I'm actually going to go back 2 moves. Because how did the knight end up on d5? Magnus played knight d5, threatening the queen and just saying, go ahead, take my knight and see what happens. Probably he should have taken it, because now after queen b8, bishop h3, he still has to take the knight, only this time it's under worse circumstances. So he's taken the knight. What is Magnus going to do? He might play bishop takes d7. No, he might. But he's going to go e6, opening up the attack against the queen and also having the attack on the black knight on d7. So Magnus is down a piece, but he has 2 extremely powerful bishops pointing down towards the black king. I would be very impressed if Gorozhanin managed to survive this. And he's sacrificing his queen. He's giving up his queen for 2 pieces. Probably he had to do that. But on the other hand, now Magnus is a queen up. And yeah, that's not good either. That's not good either. So queen up for Magnus Carlsen after very impressive attacking play. All gnomes have time advantage, says Angela. And that's very good news. Crushing, says Mop Goes Ham. That's 3 very random words put together. Aryan Tari with the white pieces against Ilja Dudukin. And Aryan has a big advantage with white. I'm very happy with his position. Maybe he should go with the knight to c4 and then to d6. Maybe he should go rook e4, trying to put the rook in an attacking position toward the black king. I think Aryan is going to spend a bit of time here because there are just so many tempting options and it's going to be difficult to decide between all those good moves. Daniel Vodal says, and he's coming with compliments to the streamer, so that's definitely gonna get on air. He says, you're a top streamer, no wonder Real Broadcasting TV wants you in their studio. I heard yesterday on TV that you were gonna Twitch today, so I came looking forward to this. Keep on doing a great job. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you. The problem is that I might lose my voice by the end of this day. So I'm going to have some tea. Yeah, Aryan is spending a lot of time here. And I think the reason is that he has so many good options. But having seen how the last round went, having seen how effective it was, having those 1 or 2 extra minutes on your opponent, I really think that he should make a decision. Either this rook move, which is a bit strange, maybe I'm leaning towards knight c4. Knight c4, and then you also threaten something against the a5 pawn. I think that would be my choice. We'll go back to Magnus, who still is a queen up And this queen is doing a good job of hunting black pawns. So Gorozhanin is not going to survive this. And also there's an option for Magnus just to take the bishop on e7. So the last move was the rook taking an important black pawn on d3. And if given the option, I think Magnus is just going to give the queen back. No, he goes rook c6. It's an interesting move. Magnus is going to give away his rook. And now, that's a good move. Check, threatening the king, threatening the bishop. That's a doubled attack. Magnus saw that in advance. The bishop is going to go to g2. There's going to be checkmate. And Gorozhanin gets to feel how it is playing against a world championship winner. And it's not a pleasant feeling. Well, it might be, but you're going to lose the game. And we have Elham with the black pieces, and he just made a big blunder. He allowed the knight to take on b7, and not only did he lose a pawn, there's also a double attack against his queen and a rook. I don't see how he can get out of this. So let's go back. Elham had... Oh no, he had already lost an exchange. There's a rook on a1 hidden behind my microphone. So he was already an exchange down and then made this rook d8 blunder. And that's going to be the game. And there's not going to be any way to come back from this with white winning a second exchange. Queen b6 takes on d8. He might even toss in rook b1. But regardless, this is going to be hopeless for our kid. But on the other hand, that's kind of part of our strategy, right? We know that Elham is going to have a tough time. It's going to be a very good experience for him playing against such strong players. And he might get a point. He might get a win. He's a pretty strong guy. Okay, so this opposite colored bishop endgame, which... And now, wow, Grigorians blundered his pawn. Now Johan can play g6. And there's no way of saving this pawn. So Johan is going to have an advantage here. That's very good play by Johan. But I think in this position, after rook b8, I was thinking maybe to keep the rooks on the board instead of exchanging. So now Johan is... Yeah, rook a1, somebody is suggesting in the chat on chess.com, but this is the crucial part. The bishop is doing a good job of both protecting the a1 square and making attacking threats against the f2 square. So Johan is just going to win the pawn on d6, and then his bishop is still amazingly well placed. So Johan is going to have good chances to play for a win, even though it's opposite colored bishops. Thank you to Dudukin for subscribing. And thank you to Danish Bear, who says, I hope you guys win the whole thing. And Oslo Trolls has the lead in their match. So both Norwegian teams are doing very well this round. Let's see if Johan can create some trouble for his higher rated opponent. In general, a draw in this game is a good result for us. But seeing as how Johan is a pawn up with 5 minutes more on the clock, he's going to want to win this game. He'll try to go for a win. Let's check in with Aryan. I have been very optimistic about Aryan's position for a reasonably long time. And I think there's a good illustration of that with the black bishop attacking, well, being blocked by his own pawn. So I as a black player, you would actually seriously consider just giving up this pawn. But right now there's a problem of if you go ahead with opening the diagonal for your bishop, then you're going to give your opponent a passed pawn as well. So if he could just remove the pawn from the game, that would be his chosen move. And basically that's what he's doing. He's playing his queen to a5, thinking of going queen d5. And he's basically saying that, go ahead, take my pawn. I want you to remove this pawn so that my bishop makes threats in the long diagonal. Wow, g4. g4 from Aryan. That's a very risky move. Very risky move. This game just got very interesting. g4. Aryan wants to play rook c5, but then his other rook loses its protection. So that's off the table. And any other move, if he doesn't play a rook c5, then black is able to play queen to d5. So I would say that Aryan's position has deteriorated. I think this is now just a very open game. Both players can win. a3 from Aryan. So probably... if queen d5, then he can go rook c5. That's interesting play from Aryan. So he's just saying, no, I'm not going to guess that move. He's saying you cannot play queen d5 because then I go rook c5. And he's playing a3 to make sure that the pawn was not under attack the moment black goes queen d5. But Aryan is low on time. Aryan is a minute behind on the clock. And in such a tricky position with both players really attacking the opponent's king. Yeah, this could go either way. Aryan is better. His pawns are better placed. His pieces are more centralized. So white is definitely better. But it's going to be a very tricky time trouble situation coming up. So Elham has resigned. The score is currently 4.5, 4.5, 2.5, because Johan just made a draw in his game against Grigoriants. So Johan, even with a pawn up, because of the opposite colored bishops, he was unable to make progress. And then we have Aryan remaining. But it's still a very good start for the Gnomes. We're up by 2 points. And hopefully we can keep that lead after this game. And right now this game could go either way. Aryan is better, but his king is unsafe with the amount of pawns that has kind of done their own thing going into the attack. And it's going to be an interesting game to follow. Rook c1. So Aryan is increasing the pressure on this c6 pawn. But on the other hand, he's not really interested in taking that pawn for the reasons mentioned earlier, that taking that pawn would open up the diagonal against white's king. Rook b5. That doesn't look like a good move to me. I think I would take that rook. But then on the other hand, yeah. Maybe you can just stay put. How can Aryan just stay put and improve his position without losing on time? Maybe queen f3? No. No, it's a very tricky position for both players. And that's why I think time is going to be a very important factor. And Aryan is 30 seconds down on the clock. Yeah. Wow, the Oslo Trolls have won 4-0 in their second matchup. And they lost their first matchup 3.5, 0.5, 0.5, 3.5. So they, even after winning, sweeping the second round with 4-0, they're only 1 point up in the match. That's, wow. That's pretty strange. Thy Fat Bat is asking, wouldn't getting the king a little more involved in this pawn setup? Yeah, I don't know. I would prefer that the king is just stays out of the way. I think the white king is in more trouble than the black king at the moment because of this potential of the diagonal. So Aryan is just keeping his rook on c5 to prevent the diagonal from opening. So I think right now he has a strategy of keeping the rook on c5 to make sure that at no point the black pawn can go forward. And that's actually a very good, that's a very good idea actually. That's a sound strategic idea. So keeping the rook here, I think that's clever. I think that's very clever from Aryan. And now maybe bishop d2. And there are a lot of rooks and queens on the same. Bishop d2 was going to win the game. I think had he played bishop d2 instead there, he would have won. d5 may be also good, but now it's going to get extremely tricky. Because he's going to take with the e-pawn and then he's going to go c5. c5 now, sacrificing the pawn to open up the diagonal. So Aryan had the idea of keeping the diagonal closed, but now it's going to open. On the other hand, it might not make that much of a difference because he can play his pawn to f3 and close the diagonal. So rook a6 instead, and now maybe rook back to c5 and keep the black bishop locked in. I think so. Let's go rook c5, and then the other rook can put pressure on the d file. Because I would like one rook to stay on c5, preventing the pawn sacrifice. Okay, so Aryan goes rook d1. I really think black should sacrifice this pawn to open up the diagonal. Queen e7, threatening queen h4 check. Okay, good timing from Aryan. Bishop c5. Once again using the c5 square to block in the bishop. That's a good move. That's going to be the winning move actually. Because he's also putting the pressure on the knight on d6, the queen on e7. This is a lot of pressure on the black position now. And he's ready on the next move to double his rooks. Thank you to Kongen, who has subscribed. And a reminder to everybody that the Norwegian derby, the Oslo Trolls against the Norway Gnomes, is going to be on January 31st. I might actually do that stream in Norwegian. A knight g6 from Aryan, threatening the queen, opening up the attack against the knight on d6. Let's do a count. 1, 2, 3 white pieces attacking the knight on d6. There's only 2 black pieces defending that knight. That means it's safe to capture. Rook takes d6. Aryan is a piece up, and his opponent Dudukin will be forced to resign. They're gonna make a couple of more moves. Rook d7, yes. And then bishop d4 on the next. Bishop d4, queen c7. There's just so many good moves. Queen c7 now. Queen d4 is also good. Even rook takes g7 is good. Queen c7 is the most accurate finish. There's no way of stopping. Well, probably you can stop the checkmate, but you cannot simultaneously save the rook on a5. And Dudukin is going to be forced to resign. And that means that in this round, the Norway Gnomes have taken another win among the 4 games. We won this round 2.5, 1.5. Given that Aryan wins this game, which I kind of thought was not something to question. He can even go rook d8 is good if he wants to eliminate black pieces before he wins. Bishop d4 was good enough as well. His opponent has resigned. The Norway Gnomes are up by 5.5 to 2.5. 5.5, 2.5. We are up by 3 points. Up by 3 points. That was a very good round for the trolls. So I'm gonna do some stretching to make sure I'm gonna survive for the entire match. Um, 92 Tommy asks, so is it the total score and not how many rounds each team won? And that is correct. So we're not counting whether or not we win the kind of mini matches of the 4 games. We're counting the total score, because that's when every player has played every player on the opposing team. So right now we have a 3-game lead. But on the other hand, as the matchups become more close, maybe we will suffer for having Elham on the last board. I think not, and that is part of our team strategy. Kafka asks, is your neck okay? I'm not sure. I'm guessing no. But at the same time, I'm guessing that my neck has been an issue for a decade already. So it doesn't hurt, which is kind of the most important part. There are people with back pain, and that sounds horrible. So I just get a bit sitting in the same position all the time. Are there any good chess books for beginners? Asks Daw. Yeah, there are, but it's not really my area of expertise, because it's not really the kind of chess books I have a habit of buying. There's this one book I really like, 64 Ways to Win at Chess. That's going to be my recommendation, but it's very difficult to find, because I think it's out of print. It's pretty old, from the time when I was starting out in chess. Poxo says, you're the king. regardless of Magnus's rating. Thank you, sir. We will have the next round in 4 minutes. So that's 4 more minutes, and we'll have the third round. We're now halfway through the match, and the Gnomes are up by 3. But at this point, I should mention that the Gnomes was up by 3 points going into the final 4 games previously in the last season, and we ended up losing the match. So anything can happen, but I think having Magnus on the first board is just such a confidence boost for the other players, because he has been absolutely killing his opponents. So it's both for the opponents, it's kind of double trouble that Magnus is winning his games, but also that they are losing confidence after playing against Magnus. So it's very valuable for our team to have him on board 1. Agdestein fan asks, what is your day job, Jon Ludvig? I always wondered. And the answer to that is, this is my day job. I'm a professional chess player. I'm approaching my 5th year anniversary of being a full-time chess player. So right now it means streaming because of this chess.com partnership with Twitch. And previously I've been doing some teaching, some lectures, some commentary, some seconding during the World Championship match, and a little bit of playing too. So I've been doing a lot of chess, but a lot of stuff. But chess has been the common denominator. Kafka is concerned about Magnus, it being stressful to do this on his day off. And then we can look on how much time he had left in this 34 move game. He had 12 minutes left. So, I mean, he's having fun. I really think he's having fun. He's crushing his opponents and he's having fun doing it. 50 Ways to Win at Chess by Giddens. That is not the one I was talking about. I was not recommending Steve Giddens. I just want that on the record. I don't remember the author. It was one of the English guys. Baker, maybe something. Some very common English name. And it was 64 something to win at chess. Maybe John Walker. Yeah, something very British. But 64 was one of the key phrases in the title. Okay, so we have another game coming up. It's 6:50, which means we should have the next round. Next round. I cannot see my guys on the people to look at. Follow Carlsen, following. And we're off. Magnus is playing e4, the king pawn. I'm gonna find the other guys. Aryan has Grigoriants, this very strong Russian player. Even with the white pieces, I'm happy if Aryan just doesn't lose. I think Grigorians is such a strong blitz player and by far their biggest threat. So Grigorians, of their points, he has taken 2 of them. So they have 3.5 points. No. Yeah? 3.5? 2.5? They have 2.5 points, and Grigorians have taken 2 of those. No. Okay, I'm officially confused. He made a draw against Johan in the last round. Okay, so he had, but at the very least, Grigorians has taken more than 50% of his team's points. So Aryan being solid here with white is appreciated. will go to Johan's table, and I think Johan has exceeded expectations. He's been playing very well. He had advantage with black against Grigoriants, and he completely outplayed his opponent in the first game. A very nice positional game. So Johan with black against the lowest rated Russian player, Dudukin, but he's about the same strength as the two other guys. So this is going to be another positional battle with this pawn structure. Black will go c5, trying to put pressure on the white center. And then we have Elham. Elham, where are you? There. Elham is black against Gorozhanin. So Gorozhanin just had a game against Magnus in which he got crushed. And now we will see if Elham can do something against this guy. So queen b3 is going to be a bit of an awkward move, putting pressure towards the center as well as the b7 pawn. So opening theory is not Elham's main expertise. He's very good in tricky positions, so we will give him some attention when he has managed to create some tricks for his opponent. Johan, with his opening, is playing positional chess, trying to go for the queen exchange. If given the option, he will take on d4. Probably his opponent will avoid that by playing queen e2. Aryan has not been playing solid. Wow, what an opening. We will have to go back. Knight c3, knight c6, and Aryan goes g4. Very interesting play, but very risky. Team captain does not approve. We are 3 points up, and now Aryan is playing a very complicated, very tricky opening. g6, d4, takes, bishop g7. I would be very happy with Aryan's position if this pawn was just one step further down. As it is, I don't know. It could be if he goes h3, protecting his pawn, and then develops its knight. Maybe it's a good opening for him. It could be. But we were 3 points up. So as the team captain and the bias that brings, I would have liked him to play slightly more solid. Too weak, too slow. That is a reference I know very well. Do you feel that the majority of the matches are won on the board or before the match even starts with strategic board selections? It's an interesting question, but I really think that it's decided on the board because you are dependent on having your players winning games, essentially. For instance, your top player needs to set the standard. The top player needs to really get points against the lower rated guys on the opposing team, regardless of who your top player is. And the bottom board player, that's always going to be a difficult thing. You want your bottom board to grab as many points as possible. In some ways, I think the bottom board will often decide matches. I think it will often be decisive how many points your bottom board manages to get. And we're going to pay some attention to Magnus Carlsen and his king pawn opening, because this might be another knockout win for the world champion. So there's a rook on the g-file towards the black king. If I was black here, I would be seriously concerned about my king's safety. On the other hand, Magnus has given up the bishop pair. Wow. Queen f4. That feels like a mistake. Queen takes b2. Queen takes b2. Probably Magnus will need to go king d2 after queen takes b2. Queen takes king b2, threatening rook b1, trapping the queen. That's an interesting thing when the queen switches back. Threatening to trap the queen. Maybe king d2 is his intention and king d2 is probably just good. Make sure that after queen takes b2, bishop takes f6 would be a huge mistake. After bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, queen takes a1, king d2, and then queen sacrifices itself on g1. Knight takes g1, and there's no rook pinning the g-pawn, so that Magnus loses his queen after all. So I think the idea is queen takes b2, then king d2. And his opponent didn't dare challenge Magnus in that variation, and now Magnus is free to castle, getting another rook into play, but more importantly, getting his king to protect the b2 pawn. So this looks very dangerous for the Russian Sharafiev. Yeah, I don't know about the intonation. 64 Things You Need to Know in Chess by John Walker. That is recommended by Grandmaster Hammer, who has once again spoken about himself in the third person. How is your strategy when it comes to lineups? Is Magnus going to play all rounds? When do we get to see Fressinet? This is a good question. Will we see Fressinet, our French import? Too weak, too slow, but he's not too weak, too slow for the Norway Gnomes. The computer says plus 3.4 for Magnus. That is a very solid score, and it's making me very optimistic about Magnus winning this game. The strategy about lineup is just having as strong a team as possible. Every time Magnus says, I can play, Magnus will play. I mean, that's just a given. You have the world champion on the team. If he says, yes, I'll play for the team, you say, thank you very much. Great master. So Magnus is going to play if he's available. Fressinet is going to play. He's not just there for being a good guy on paper. We will be using him. Yeah, we're just gonna play as strong as team as possible. That's the general idea. Are you doing commentary tomorrow on TV2? Yes, I am. TV2 will be back on Sportskanalen with broadcast of the 6th round in the Tata Steel tournament. He's playing black against Peter Svidler, Magnus is. And I will be doing commentary with Johan Salomon, who is playing on the Norway Gnomes today. Let's switch to Johan's game. He will be doing commentary with me, with Hans Olav Lahlum, and with Finn Gnatt. So we will be back tomorrow at 1:25 p.m. Porch Monkey says, I love saying wow. Maybe I do. But now that you've mentioned it, I'm probably going to be saying it less, because you make me self-conscious. So if you liked it, you shouldn't have said anything. And if you didn't like it, you're a very clever guy, because now you're going to make sure you don't get it too often. Okay, so we have Aryan with the white pieces. a very complicated position. We were up by 3 points at the start of this round, and Aryan has created a mess on the board. The good thing is that Aryan is pretty good with messes, much better than me. When things are complicated, he's often very good. But on the other hand, his pieces are not very good at the moment. His bishop is blocked by both the pawn on f3 and d5. There's a big square on f5 for a black knight. I don't think this is going very well for Aryan. It was very ambitiously played, but it might come back to haunt him. Groger points out a very important thing about the rules, and that is that Magnus's rating only counts as 2700 against the team average. So the team is actually having positive effects of Magnus being in. So Magnus only counts as 2700, which means we actually have an average rating of higher than 2500 if we choose to field our strongest team. Anish asks, has the sound on the TV2 broadcast been fixed? I know that we changed to wired microphones instead of the wireless ones, and I am told that this will seriously improve the quality of the sound. Let's go back to Magnus. He has a lot of pieces pointing toward the black king, and at the same time this black queen on a5 is not really doing much. Black has put the most valuable piece on the edge of the board, completely away from everything happening on the other side. Magnus just sacrificed a piece on f6. Boom. But I'm not sure about the follow-up. So I'm guessing after pawn takes, he will sacrifice his rook on g8 to remove the knight, and then take on h6, then take on f6, and then go rook g3. Okay. No, but yeah. No, that's a good line. That's a good line. Rook g3 in the end, and it's going to be checkmate. And if he takes with any other piece than the pawn, then there's still coming some kind of rook sacrifice along the g file. And yeah, trouble, trouble, trouble. Boom! Says Porch Monkey. Works better than wow. So when Magnus now takes on g8, which he is going to do, then I will go boom. Mate in 7 moves, and it's rook takes g8, then queen takes h6, queen takes f6, and then the other rook to g3, and checkmate along the h file. Boom! Check, check, and now a rook in the middle and rook g3. Maybe Magnus will even go rook g6. He might go rook g4. There's quite a few of winning moves here. So rook g3 and then rook h3. So the idea is to checkmate the black king on the h file while the queen is making the other black pieces preoccupied. So he chose g6. The idea is the same, to go rook h6 check. Black will play bishop takes f5. Magnus will take back the bishop, and after that there will be no way of stopping checkmate in the next 2 moves. Booyah! We can also do booyah. His position was winning anyway. Yeah. No, Magnus was certainly winning, but sometimes the best way to finish off a game is by sacrificing a rook. And that's precisely what Magnus did here. And Magnus is completely destroying the Russian guys. Completely destroying them. So this is the third game in a row. Magnus will finish with more than 10 minutes on the clock. And it's been so convincing, so boom style every single time. And Magnus's opponent has resigned. We'll move to Aryan's game. I still think he's a bit worse with the white pieces, but it's still unclear, and he's up 2 minutes on the clock, and Grigorians hasn't been as fantastic as I thought he would be. So still chances here for Aryan. Who designed the logo for Norway Gnomes? That would be chess.com staff. I don't know precisely who. I know that Marina is one of the designers who's doing some very nice stuff for me. Yeah, chess.com staff, the Norway Gnomes logo. I came up with the name, so I want credit for the name if you think the name is good. Hasa asks, does Magnus take a share of the prize money, or does he divide it among the team should you win? And what I can say is that if we win a prize, it will be shared among the team based on how many games they played throughout the season. Why the gnomes, asks Danish Bear. And it's just because I thought it was funny. So I am fully responsible for thinking, number one, it's funny, which it is. And yeah, I like wordplay. And I like the fact that the G is silent. I like the kind of... Some might consider me weird. I'm one of those people, but there are others who think, yeah, that's about the level of nerdiness I think is normal. The name is the best part of this team, says HMW Life. And I'm just going to say thank you very much. That really warms my heart. And these Black Knights is coming in threatening positions against Aryan. I think he's going to lose this game. But maybe he can try to get a queen exchange. Trying to... No, he doesn't do that. Now knight d3. Maybe there's some lines in which he can sacrifice or put pressure on this bishop on a6. I don't know. It's a very tricky game. I would be happy for Aryan just to make a point, half a point. We will look at Johan, and Johan is playing amazing chess this round. Johan is playing so strong, and he's playing in his own style, the positional chess, and he has a great diagonal with the bishop and the queen. There's no white pawns, so white is a bit overextended. There's no white pawns to stop the pressure on that diagonal, and black is just massively better here. I would say, yeah, black is much better. It's not entirely clear how he is going to proceed. He needs some kind of plan going forward. He actually does have a plan. He's threatening to take the pawn on a4. That's very kind of simplistic, but if it works, it's good. And if bishop b5, then the bishop on e3 is hanging. White might actually not have any way of stopping bishop takes a4. That's interesting. It's good for us. Very good for us. Johan is a tactics genius, says Danish Bear. But that's not inaccurate. Johan is doing a lot of tactical exercises, but it's especially helpful to him because his main kind of way of playing chess is positionally based. So he's just trying to work on improving his tactics. Well, now he's going to win this game for sure. E takes f5. He's giving himself a very good square for the knight on e6. And also white cannot take back this bishop, this pawn, because of the rook having indirect pressure against the e3 bishop. Who runs the Gnomes Twitter account? Asks Mia. And I will tell you if you are offering compliments. And I will hide the fact if you think it's being run poorly. During the stream, I don't have the time to check out what's being tweeted, but I made sure an extremely clever, trustworthy guy is doing updates. Daniel asks, what do you use in your hair? Gel or wax? It looks better when you do it on. Yeah, I tried to read that sentence and I just couldn't. I'm sorry. Rook c1. Knight e6 I like now for Johan, putting pressure on the pawn on e6, on d4. I think this pawn on a4, it made white panic. So I don't want to take it immediately. I want to focus on the black king. So I'm thinking something like knight e6, putting pressure here. If the bishop moves, then I want to sacrifice my rook on the knight and checkmate the white king. So let's see if that happens. Knight e6 I like. Knight e6. That's going to be my choice. The Twitter account is very impressive. Then I will tell you that the guy doing the Twitter account is Christophe Gressely. You've maybe seen him in the chat. He's done some information for people with the username Gressely. And he's in general a very impressive person. And he's very trustworthy, and he's very good with graphics and stuff like that. And he's, yeah, he's very good. But therefore, I also want to take some credit because I was the one who asked him if he could do it. So I take some credit in terms of signing him for my team. Your hair looks better when you do it yourself instead of the makeup crew. That's interesting. Right now I have something very cool named, well, it's mostly water, and I have some gel. Wax I never understood how to use. But also, I mean, with the curly hair, it's always going to be tricky. Okay, we're looking at Elham's game. His opponent only has 1 minute 42 seconds left. So Elham is massively up on time. But unfortunately, he's a pawn down. He's a pawn down. And also he has this Isolani pawn on d5, Isolani pawn on a6. Yeah, it's trouble for Elham. It's trouble, but maybe he can be tricky and create some trouble in the time scramble. And Grenmo asks, is it the same Gressely that ran a Tolkien fan site? And I must say that this is new information to me, but I had dinner with him just the other week, and he was going on about how The Lord of the Rings was the most fantastic literature ever written. So I'm gonna say probably. And in the chat, he's also confirming it himself, that he is the creator of some kind of extremely geeky fan site. And it really sounds like something he would do. He's a very geeky guy. Okay, so Aryan is in trouble against Grigorians. But actually, I'm not too unhappy about his position right now. I think there's chances of him ending up in an equal ending. Probably he's still, no, definitely he's still worse. But I think he has decent chances of making a draw. And he's still 1 minute up on the clock against his, compared to his opponent. So I think good drawing chances here for Aryan. I'm going to keep an eye on this game. Actually, Johan, his opponent has only 7 seconds. So Johan is having a great attack coming with queen takes f3. There's the battery. I was talking about this. The battery of the queen and bishop is just too much for white to handle. And I think just to make it easy, let's just take this pawn. Why make it complicated? Just take the pawn and you're 3 pawns up and all the other black pawns are in trouble. Yeah, Johan goes, just takes the pawn back, brings the queen into defense. He has so many more pawns than his opponent, so he can afford to not play the objectively best moves, but just good moves. And now maybe g6. g6 pushing the queen. If the queen takes on f4, then bishop g5. There's a threat against the queen, against the rook. Johan has 3 minutes. His opponent has 10 seconds. This is definitely going to be a black win. And that means that Johan has had an absolutely spectacular round. Thursday. Normally the rounds are going to be on Wednesday, but this time it's Thursday to make sure that the participants of the Tata Steel tournament can play if they want to. And Magnus wanted to. I'm going to go back to Aryan's game. I think Johan is going to win. It's just no doubt. Whereas Aryan's game is going to have a thrilling finish. Okay, so Aryan is probably going to lose. There's a double attack against g5, against b2. And I don't see how he's getting out of that. Okay, bishop g4 is interesting. It's very interesting. So now he should probably take the pawn on g5 to make sure that he gets a passed pawn. No, he goes rook takes b2. That feels like a risky move in terms of winning this game. Because now knight c6, rook c7, knight e5, bishop e6. There's some counterplay for white. And in addition, as long as Aryan can keep this pawn on g5, he's going to make a draw. Knight f5, this you can just take the bishop, go rook a6, rook f6. Yeah, this is going to be a rook endgame with a pawn down. But it's going to be a rook endgame, which I think is a draw. Yeah, very likely to be a draw, but not set in stone. So take, rook a6, restricting the black king. Black will go rook h2, rook h6, takes on h3, king somewhere, king f4, rook h1, king takes f5, h3, king g4, h2, king g3, and it's a draw. Okay, so Grigoriants tries rook b4 instead. I have no idea what the idea is. Why didn't Aryan go rook f6? Why not rook f6? That was strange. Okay, so we're gonna get this other line instead. Takes, and now rook h6 was a draw. Rook h6 would have been an instant draw. Probably still okay. Rook g1, now rook h6. Grigorians is low on time. f6 takes. Okay, and now king g4, and Aryan will eliminate the h3 pawn. Okay, you can take on h4, you can also go back. Okay, Aryan is going to take on h4, and we're going to do a pawn ending with the active white king, f5, and Grigorians isn't even going to see if Aryan knows how to make a draw. Pawn ending with the pawn down. And now we're going to Elham, and this is what I announced. This is what I was talking about. Elham is going for the tricks. He has his king aggressively placed. Ooh, this is going to be an exciting finish. Ooh, that was a good move. That was a very good move. Sacrificing the rook. And Elham needs to go back with his rook. But on the other hand, now he's getting the pawn check. He goes back to c8. Elham has seen how to make a draw. Is he going to go for the win? Is he going to play rook g8 and go for the win? No. The draw, 3-time repetition. It's a draw. Elham has made his first half point. He had a pawn down, but somehow clearly he managed to get his king into the attack and get enough counterplay to make the draw. I have been looking forward to this occasion when I can say that our last board is no pushover. He is no pushover. And with that draw, actually the Norway Gnomes have won the match before the last game. So this was the game match-winning draw from Elham. Very, very good. I'm actually going to go on the team chat and congratulate him. Match winner draw there. Very, very good. So I think with Johan winning his game, with Magnus winning his game, I believe we are 5 points up. And that means we have won the match, seeing as how there's only 4 games remaining. There will be 4 more games, even though the match has already been decided. The extra points we can get now count towards our tiebreak score in the Eastern Division. Poxo asks, are you going to play something yourself after this? And the answer is yes. At 10 p.m. I will be playing a 1-minute tournament with packed with top level chess players. So make sure after the Pro Chess League to come back at 10 p.m. Big Yoa with a very good feedback. You should get a quick score overlay. the current score in the match. I really should do that. That's a very good point. I don't know how to do that, but I'm gonna figure out how to do that. Yeah, I could put something next to the gnome. Current score. Maybe I could get some kind of the opponent, this week's opponent. Maybe I can push the gnome to the right and then have like this week's opponent and then the current score. Potherlocker asks, can't people cheat easily? Stockfish or a computer on the side? How is it regulated? Number one, you need to sign a contract that you will not cheat. And then chess.com can kind of they can kind of determine the level of your play, and through that they have a good idea of whether you cheated or not. And the team will be punished if you cheat. Shakerlacker says, I know why I picked the whole team from the Gnomes in my fantasy. So that's going to be interesting as well. They the Pro Chess League is using a fantasy competition. And it's going to be interesting to see who wins that. On my fantasy team, I have Aryan Tari and I have Magnus Carlsen. On the other hand, I'm guessing quite a lot of people have Magnus, but he's certainly rewarding me for picking him. Elham has not won any game, but he just made a draw against an international master. No, FIDE master, Mikhail Gorozhanin. And he gets another chance against Dudukin. And poor guy, this Ilja Dudukin has lost every single game so far. So that's going to be interesting to see if Elham can make another point against the guy who presumably has not the best self-esteem. So there's one more round to go. Do you play any other games than chess, Mr. Hammer? Asks Kregoth. Yeah. But I'm kind of thinking that playing other games than chess might lose me some people. But I play a bit of Civilization. And I've been thinking about whether I should try streaming that as well. But on the other hand, I like being very good at what I stream. And streaming Civilization, I would be a complete beginner compared to the guys who really know what's going on in that game. Okay, so we have a new game, Grigoriants against Carlsen. Carlsen with a full score so far. Grigoriants has made 2 draws. We have Aryan Tari with the black pieces. And he needs to find his computer, because he was a bit late playing his first move. Our next guy is Johan Salomon. Johan Salomon is playing an interesting opening against Gorozhanin. Now I actually wouldn't mind if he goes g4. We have already decided the match, so the guys are welcome to go a bit crazy trying to attack the opponent's king. And then the very last game is going to be Elham. Elham, where are you? There! Elham with the white pieces against Dudukin. And maybe this is the one where he can get a win. That would be a fantastic debut in the Pro Chess League. Daniel asks, has it ever happened that somebody lost on time because they really had to go to the toilet? I don't know. I haven't. And I don't know of anybody who has. Okay, A3. This is not a good move. That might count as a positional mistake. And then going B4, allowing the en passant. And now the white pawn structure on the queen side has been ruined. He's definitely not a finished player yet, Elham. But he's so good even with these positional mistakes. I can't wait until we teach him some positional wisdom. Then he's gonna be a complete monster. Blokedu asks, what is the difference between an FM and a GM? So basically there are titles in chess rewarded to you by the International Chess Federation, and the highest award you can get is Grandmaster, GM. And then there's International Master, IM, and FIDE Master, FM. Let's go take a look at Mr. Carlsen. And Mr. Carlsen is feeling funny in the opening. It was a Spanish opening and Magnus went bishop b4. That's gonna definitely count as a sideline. And it also got his opponent thinking. So let's fast forward after d5 takes, queen a4 castles. The opening seems to have been a success for Magnus. Knight c3. Maybe it's not a success, because if he needs to take this knight, his opponent is happy with the bishop pair. There's a question of whether queen h5 can be replied if black can go d5 after queen d5, and there's some tactical variations that need to be calculated. So Magnus is going to spend more time now than he has in the previous games. Okay, d5, what happens? I'm not sure. d5 is going to be a very complicated move. d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes c6, knight takes c3, and then the queen keeps the coverage on the bishop on a5. So maybe these immediate tactics don't work out for white. A question from Arnold the Hobbit. Is it the same criteria for women to make Grandmaster as men? And the answer to that is yes. But there are some titles called Women's Grandmaster and Women's International Master. And those titles do have lower demands. But for the full Grandmaster title, it's the same regardless of gender. Apparently the P conversation is taking off in the chat, and Shakarlaker says, I would rather lose a tournament game on time than losing my honor for peeing my pants. That's good on you. I'm not sure that would be my priority. I think I might rather pee my pants than lose a game of chess. But I suppose that says more about me than anything else. Mao is saying that Magnus playing against the isolated queen's pawn. It's time to learn. But I'm not sure what we're going to learn about this isolated queen pawn that suddenly went berserk, going on the attack. And now he's free to take the pawn on c7. And I don't see anything bad happening after that move. So I'm expecting pawn takes c7. And then Magnus has to justify somehow that he allowed this pawn to get way down on the board. I assume he will take this bishop. And then probably something like bishop d7, bishop c6. And he will say that there's no way for white to get reinforcements protecting this pawn, and in time he will manage to surround it with the rook, with the bishop, and gobble it after a while. Thank you to Big Space Otter for subscribing. I think Magnus is going to take the bishop. But there are other good moves. Bishop g4 is being suggested. Yeah, it seems like Magnus is going to spend a little more time this game. He's playing against a much stronger player than the other Russian guys. Yeah, he's going to take back, and bishop d7. No bishop d7. He's going straight for the pawn. And as the team captain, I think I should be happy about that. He's really making sure that this pawn doesn't survive any longer than it needs to. And that's probably a good move. It's probably a good move from Magnus. And then he's playing with the bishop pair against a pair of knights on an open board. And that should be in the bishop pair's favor. Okay, rook c1, putting it on the same file as the queen, as the pawn. Probably we can take the pawn and then evacuate the c file. Queen h4, I'm guessing. Queen h4, and then hoping to get knight d5 at some point. We're going to look at some of the other games. Let's see, Elham, with his positional mistake in the opening, has some pressure against the a2 pawn. But we can see why he's so dangerous, because on the other side of the board, he has started attacking. And the knight on h7 is going to be stuck there for a very long time, defending against the possible pawn break from white. So even though the pawn structure is bad, I'm not sure. And he blundered. So the pawn structure didn't necessarily have to be such a bad thing, but losing the pawn on a3, that's going to be a problem. So now he needs to take on a3 and play rook e3. There's no choice. He's going to go for it. Still a pawn down, but on the other hand, if we end up with more exchanges, then there's no chance of black winning, because there's no way of the black pawns being able to come forward ahead of the white pawns. So taking now on b3 would mean that only white can be better. So he needs to avoid this exchange or take control over the a file. So I'm thinking something like queen a7, exchange on c5. It's very unclear still. Even though having blundered this pawn was bad, the black position is dangerous because of the king potentially being in trouble after g5, and so the king always needs the knight to be on h7, and that means the knight is just constantly out of play. So the knight is going to be out of play for basically the entire game. So it's still tricky, even with a pawn down, or a pawn up, if we see it from black's perspective. It's still going to be very tricky for black to win this game. Thank you to Nazelnov for subscribing. And Oslo Trolls is playing a very tightly contested match against Armenia Eagles. And the Oslo Trolls are up 7-6 with 3 games remaining. So that's a very close match. The Norway Gnomes have already won their match, but now we're trying to fix our tiebreak score. So the more we manage to win this match, the bigger the tiebreak. Okay, I'm going to go back to Carlsen. Carlsen has an probably equal endgame, but where he's slightly better because of the bishop pair against the pair of knights. Aryan, we have not been looking at Aryan's game, and he has played a pretty poor opening, I would say. I think Aryan is in trouble. Aryan is in trouble. There's he lost the bishop pair. He has some attack brewing against his king on b8. And there's also the concern about knight c3. Knight c3 and then taking the pawn on d5. I don't see how Aryan is going to defend that pawn. Maybe he has some knight c4 counterattack scheme going on. So probably knight c4. Maybe even knight f5. Knight f5 might be more effective. Knight f5 and then knight takes d5, then queen e6. Yes, it's on the board. It's on the board. So he might get a pawn down, but now there's some tricks. No, he chose to take on e3. That surprised me. That surprised me. Now king g2 protecting the pawn on g3. And black is just completely busted. Black is just completely busted. Yeah. No, it's tricky when you know that you already won the match. You might get a little bit complacent. And I think Aryan is going to lose this game. I think Aryan will lose. He's a pawn down. And then we have Johan with the white pieces. He's also much worse against a very strong bishop on the diagonal combined with the rook on the d file. Yeah. No, this is a fantastic position for black, which means both Johan and Aryan are in trouble, and as is Elham. Elham is also in trouble. Maybe Elham can try to take control over the A file, going queen g2 and then rook a2 on the next move. So probably you need to go knight c5, putting pressure on the pawn on e4. Now if rook a2, you take, and you take the pawn on e4. Yeah, so it was clever strategy of black to keep the knights. If the knights had been exchanged off, I think white would have been solid to make a draw, even with a pawn down. But now there's uncomfortable pressure everywhere. Nazonov, thank you for the chair. bits top chair. I must admit, I'm pretty new to Twitch, so I'm not really down with all the culture and etiquette, but I understand that bits and chairs are very good. And thank you to HMW Life for your subscription. That's $15 chair from Nazilnov. Thank you very much. Let's go see. Johan is protecting all his pawns. That's actually a good thing. That's a pretty good... Maybe because he's protecting this pawn, and he's kind of protecting this pawn. I mean, his position looks absolutely horrible, but as long as he's protecting his pawns, he has this knight making sure that black doesn't get too active, and he can organize some counterplay against the e6 pawn. And now he's coming with a rook as well. Now he's coming with the rook. Rook d6. Rook d6 and then knight g6 in some lines. He's organizing some counterplay, Johan. And Elham is being outplayed. Knight d3. The knight found a very nice home on the f4 square. And gradually, I think we will see the black queen entering the position. This is massively unpleasant for white. Very unpleasant. Maybe Elham now at some point can manage to get g5. And this is good play by Elham, going rook e3. He's managing to exchange off the rook. And that's very good. That's very good news. Because the rook and queen in tandem were creating a lot of trouble on the A file. And eliminating one of them is going to be a big help towards easing the pressure. And the knight is threatened by both rook and bishop. So the knight has to move. And he goes to f4. And now there's no more pressure on the e4 square. The e4 pawn. So now you can exchange off the rooks and go queen f2. It's still unpleasant with the knight lodged close to the white king. But it's not entirely clear how black should make progress. I mean, he should probably do this. I think that was a mistake. I think Elham should have used the opportunity to exchange off the rooks. Now rook a2, and both the rook and queen is going to create trouble towards the white king. Yeah. So he had the option of exchanging. It still would have been a bad position for white, but it would have been better than this, I think. But on the other hand, maybe he's planning to go infiltrate with queen b4. We'll see if Magnus can create something. No, if Elham can defend that. And we're going to take a look at Magnus. Magnus has an endgame. And we're joining just at the right moment. Because this, I believe, is Magnus winning a pawn. There's a threat towards the rook. There's a threat if the rook moves against the f4 pawn. And that's going to be trouble for Grigoriants. That's going to be trouble. So he needs to go rook e4. That's the only option. And then if bishop takes f4, he has knight takes f7 intermediate move. So after rook e4, possibly Magnus will just go with his king. Rook e4, king f5, renewing the threat of bishop takes f4. And looking good. Looking good. Maybe knight e4, knight to c5. questioning the rook and the pawn. But then Magnus has rook d4. Rook d4, rook e7. Okay, it's actually a bit tricky here. No, I'm not going to guess that move. I'm going to guess this move. Trying to complicate things. Yeah, knight c5 on the next move. Knight c5. No, no knight c5. But then you're just losing a pawn. Knight c5 now, but now it's a bit too late. Now rook c7 and then followed by bishop d6. And I think Magnus has things under control. If he wants to, he can also go rook d4 and attack the b4 pawn. That seems more his style. Well, it looks like a better move, which per definition is more Magnus's style. We have news from our Eastern Division. The Oslo Trolls have won their first ever Pro Chess League match. They have beaten the Armenian Eagles 9-7. Sandon is asking how many games will Carlsen play. This is the fourth and final game. And Magnus has a pawn up. He has a bishop and a rook against a knight and rook. And that's going to be a big black advantage for black. And now this is interesting. If Grigoriants tries to attack the pawn on b6, Magnus will play bishop g1, protecting the pawn from afar. Chess Bay is in the house. And Grigorians is under 1 minute on the clock. He's under 1 minute on the clock. I don't think there's any saving this game. I think Magnus on his Tata Steel rest day is going to do a 4-0 sweep of Russians. And appropriately, he will play Petr Svidler, the current reigning Russian champion, in the next round in Tata Steel. So maybe his Russian bashing will continue tomorrow. And Grigorians has resigned. Magnus has won. We will take a look at the other games. Johan has made a draw by repetition in this strategy of attacking the e6 square. So he was in massive trouble but managed to hold on for a draw. And that's going to be a very nice weekend for Johan, who makes 3 points out of 4. 3 points out of 4 and some very astute positional chess from the third board. And then we're going to take a look at Aryan. And Aryan has made a comeback from what I consider to be a very poor position. Somehow White has played his pawn to e4, and it was actually doing a good job on e3, protecting the dark squares. And now Aryan has taken over the dark squares. He can take the pawn on d4, and he's no longer worse. The question is whether or not he's better. And I would say yes, he is. But on the other hand, White has a passed pawn, which will be important in an ending. So it's still very much unclear. (4-0) for Carlsen, and Alyekin compliments him, and good games. And I think it was very good games from Magnus. I think he did a very good job today. Elham is being tortured. We've been looking at this game for quite a few times. And now there was a very nice strategy along the diagonal with the queen, black queen, and white king on the same diagonal. b5 opens up, threatens the rook on e3. Elham goes takes. c5 takes, and after queen c3, it's a beautiful finish from Dudukin. Knight e2, it's the double pin fork. So the knight gives itself up for both the rook and the bishop, but neither piece can take the knight because of a pin. And then we have the decisive factor, the fork on the king and the queen. A very nice way from Dudukin to finish the day, but that was the only point he managed. Okay, rook d1 from Aryan. He has offered a draw. Aryan has offered a draw, and I do not believe his opponent will accept. His opponent has a passed pawn on the h-file. I think this could be tricky for Aryan. He's a pawn down. It is an opposite colored bishop ending, but there's a passed pawn. So Aryan should play bishop g7, preventing the pawn from moving forward. He didn't do that. And now I think you have to go h6. You have to just push that pawn as far as it can go and hope for the best. No. Another chance for Aryan to go bishop g7. Yes. He goes bishop g7, and if on the next move he will go f6, and then he has some kind of fortress. So to avoid f6, white should probably sacrifice his pawn, going pawn to f6 himself. So pawn f6. You have to play with white, because otherwise black manages to get the blockade, and it's an instant draw. So you need to go f6 to play for a win. The Gnomes played really good, I think, says HMW Live. I agree. I think Johan and Magnus were outstanding today. Fantastic play from them. And very good that Elham managed to make a draw. So we have our bottom board, but he's getting us points. And that's very important for us. And now Aryan gets the option to play f6, which he should do. And I think if he does it, it will be a draw. So I think white should have played f6, but he didn't do it. And now I do believe this ending is a draw by just blockading the whole position. And they have offered a draw, and it was accepted. So it's a draw in the final match. It's 2-2 in the final 4 games. That means that the Norway Gnomes have won by 10.5 to 6. No, 5.5. 10.5, 5.5. And that's fantastic. This is a very strong team. They finished second in the knockout system in the Eastern Division last year. So starting the season, beating them 10.5, that is fantastic. Thank you to Anders for subscribing. And Anders also has a question. Are you going to be streaming Bullet Chess tonight? And yes, I am. So I guess this is the end of the stream. This is where I tell people that I will be back in 1.5 hours. I will get some dinner. I will eat some chocolate to celebrate that the Norway Gnomes have won their first match of the season. We will. I will be back in 1.5 hours with Bullet Chess, 1 minute chess, 2 hours Bullet Chess. As far as I know, Magnus will also be playing bullet, so you might get some more Carlsen action. Am I going to miss some questions? Who is Elham? Elham is our very talented 13-year-old. He's a very tricky blitz player. Great stream. Congratulations. Thank you, Mia. Big Joa is going to miss out on the stream with the bullet chest because he has to work early. And that is, yeah, some people live like that. Some people has to live like that. And I'm pretty happy I don't. And according to the chat, Gressely has been doing an amazing job on Twitter. So I'm signing him up for every single time he's available, for sure. So thank you to Gressely. Probably he's listening. Apparently he has done an amazing job. I will take a look at it myself afterwards, and I will be back in 90 minutes to do the bullet chess. I hope to see you then.